Have you ever watched a movie in which the pacing, characters, and structure is so satisfying that by the end you feel like you just watched something special? Take Alien, Jaws, Predator, Terminator, etc. There are very few games that elicit the same feeling as these films, but a perfect example of this is the Resident Evil series. I've been a huge Resident Evil fan since I was a kid. I was about 8 years old when I first played Resident Evil 3 on the PlayStation 1, and it made me discover my love for all things horror. There was just something about the sound of the wind blowing through the deserted streets of Raccoon City with the moans of the undead in the distance that truly opened my eyes to the wonders of good atmosphere. The dread of entering combat with few ammo and healing items gave me a sort of tension that I could revel in and fight my way out of, unlike whatever hardship I was facing in my real life at the time. As I grew older, I just took this as a fact. I love Resident Evil, and for the most part, who doesn't? It's easily one of the best-selling and most critically acclaimed video game series ever, with 8 main titles and an announced 9th title that's coming out next year, as well as countless spin-offs, various films, and over 160 million sales overall. Now, as a disclaimer, I'm someone who overthinks a lot, probably more than I should, and a thought occurred to me. Why do I love Resident Evil? I just couldn't put my finger on it. It seemed like such a weird mishmash of genres, cheesy writing, and convoluted lore. But it somehow works wonderfully, probably better than it should. And then, as I was watching a video from Happy Console Gamer, and he said that he loved Resident Evil games because they reminded him of the film Alien. And I thought to myself, well, it just so happens that Alien is actually my favorite movie of all time. Hey, maybe he's onto something. The truth is, Resident Evil is a homage from a Japanese perspective to the best Hollywood horror and action films of all time. And funnily enough, a Capcom producer once even compared Resident Evil to how in Ghost of Tsushima, an American developer made a tribute to Japanese culture. What this means is that there is usually a perfect balance between it being a Japanese game and a tribute to American cinema. Through the years, Capcom managed to perfect this formula, lose sight of it, and find it again. So what makes Resident Evil good? Well, it's influences. Capcom knows exactly where to pick and choose the best components of these classic films people love to make a truly memorable and satisfying experience that very few games manage to accomplish. So what is this formula I keep talking about, and how does it relate to these films and Resident Evil? Let's take, for example, the aforementioned Alien. In '79, director Ridley Scott released his horror sci-fi masterpiece Alien. In the film, a crew of 7 people boarding a ship called the Nostromo receive a distress signal on their way back to Earth. When they arrive to their location, they find themselves in a deserted planet with a huge structure of what it seems to be a ship. Inside they find countless eggs, one of which opens and releases a creature that attaches itself to one of the character's face. After being brought back to the Nostromo, this character named Kane stays in a coma for a while until he somehow wakes up, appearing normal at first. Everything seems to be looking on the up and up when suddenly a creature bursts out of his chest. This is the Xenomorph, the movie's main antagonist. Throughout the film, we see the character of Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, survive the horror that is being trapped inside of a ship in the middle of space with a murderous alien aboard, while also uncovering a conspiracy detailing the hidden true motives of their employers and their corporate interests in capturing the perfect biological weapon. By the end, Ripley, equipped with a flamethrower, overcomes the horror and puts herself in cryosleep, awaiting the return back to Earth. By this point, the viewer has felt both compassion for the characters, fear because of the Xenomorph, catharsis when Ripley shoots it into space, and relief by the time she goes to cryosleep. In another example, there's Predator. In this 1987 film, directed by John McTiernan, a group of 7 elite soldiers, not very dissimilar to RE's own STARS unit, are sent to a jungle in Central America to seemingly rescue hostages, only for Dutch, the main character, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, to uncover the real reason they were sent in the first place. They were sent there to dispose of a guerrilla encampment that had found intel on the CIA. By the time this raid is uncovered, the team finds itself being hunted by a creature simply called a Predator. By the end, only Dutch survives by being resourceful and getting the upper hand in a seemingly impossible situation. And just to add one more, in the 1984 film by James Cameron, The Terminator, a waitress named Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton, finds herself being chased by a stalker character called the Terminator, not dissimilar to Mr. X or Nemesis. He's a cybernetic organism sent from the future to hunt her, as her child John Connor would later become the leader of the resistance that would fight to dispel the AI threat Skynet, who created the Terminator. The film is often tense, with brief moments of humor, love scenes, thrilling action, and violence beautifully built with practical effects. By the end, Sarah Connor again does the impossible and kills the Terminator, giving the famous one-liner, "You're terminated, fucker." Not unlike this one-liner given by Jill Valentine in Resident Evil 3.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
By this point, it's very clear that these 3 films follow a somewhat similar formula. We have a likable protagonist who is either an everyday person or, even with combat training, is severely underpowered compared to the challenges they face. They are eventually hunted by a creature or creatures whose capabilities far outweigh those of our protagonist, but by the end, the viewer is given huge relief and catharsis as our main character eventually finds the strength to defeat this threat. So other examples could be Jurassic Park, Anaconda, Deep Blue Sea, etc. These moments of horror, humor, thrilling action, corporate conspiracies, and this feeling of catharsis as the protagonist finally gets the upper hand at the end is imbued directly in Resident Evil's DNA and is part of the secret sauce of what makes these games so enticing to people. As I was writing this script, they actually announced Resident Evil Requiem, and they even expressed that their objective was to make addictive horror because of the satisfaction players feel when they finally defeat the enemy in a horror game, which is exactly one of the strong points I'm talking about in this video. Moving on, the key points are the following. Resident Evil has a big cast of main characters, all of them very likable and memorable from a design standpoint. There are usually attractive people who look like Hollywood actors and are complete badasses in what they do, but the player also relates to them as they feel vastly underpowered in the situations they find themselves in. Like the characters, the player needs to be resourceful, similar to Ripley, Dutch, and Sarah Connor, in a way to get the ending, where they usually are given the ultimate weapon to destroy the enemy before a satisfying one-liner and are then rescued by a helicopter as they watch the sunrise, similar to the ending of Jurassic Park. There are many types of horror games. A lot of people enjoy the feeling of being pursued, and this is definitely something that exists in Resident Evil as well. There's also another alternative, to fight back. In terms of gameplay, Resident Evil usually finds the perfect balance between scaring you stiff and giving you enough weapons to make you feel like the ultimate badass by the end. This, let's call it arc, perfectly encapsulates the feeling of watching these classic action horror films. Just as Ripley finally stands her ground against the xenomorph with her flamethrower, so does the player in Resident Evil with the huge amount of firepower the developers usually give you. You start small and fragile, but with good resource management and quick thinking, you can be given the ultimate power trip by the end. I'm fragile, but I'm not that fragile. Once you see those credits roll, you feel a huge amount of relief and self-satisfaction by overcoming these odds. And although there are moments where you can't fight back, there is usually a good balance between those moments and shooting a monster straight in the face.
Can't you see that humans are the real monsters?
Kill zombies, behead zombies, roundhouse kick a zombie into the concrete, blow zombies' heads with magnums.
This way, even if you don't like scary games, you do get the gameplay enjoyment of an action game and feel like you're growing with the character and becoming a big action hero. This is something, again, Capcom is trying to do with Resident Evil Requiem, and I have no doubts that Grace Ashcroft is going to be an incredible protagonist. Another trope usually found in Resident Evil is the corporate conspiracy angle, mainly involving Umbrella and other such corporations that deal with biological weapons. In the original Resident Evil trilogy, Umbrella is mainly seen as a pharmaceutical company that creates various health-related products for consumers, when in reality, as we all know, that is all a sham to cover their illegal development of biological weapons. These corporate and governmental conspiracies are a big part of what makes the plot of Resident Evil games so compelling, as you are uncovering the mystery at the same time as the character, making the player feel immersed in this world, and even by the time you get to Village and find the lore to be completely batshit crazy and nonsensical, there is always this B-movie feel that never lets you go and refuses to be compelling. Umbrella is basically Weyland-Yutani from Alien or InGen from Jurassic Park. Then there's the obvious visual inspiration for the enemies. In the first one, we have zombies that look straight out from a George A. Romero picture. The Drain Deimos looks like something from Cronenberg. The sharks are an obvious homage to, well, the shark from Jaws. The chainsaw enemies are a homage to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Shining. Mia from Resident Evil 7 is a tribute to Mia from Evil Dead Remake. The protagonist spitting one-liners and killing zombies with a shotgun is obviously very reminiscent of Evil Dead, and I could go on and on. We can safely say Capcom managed to find the perfect formula for a video game. Not only does it benefit from the best tropes of all the greatest Hollywood films, giving the player tension, brief moments of relief with the safe rooms, and ultimately becoming a power fantasy by the end, as the player is rewarded by playing resourcefully, but it also benefits from the fact that these games are, ironically, mutable. If Capcom tomorrow decides to make a Resident Evil game inspired by, Hereditary, I would give them my full confidence. In the same series, we have games that feel like Alien or Night of the Living Dead, but somehow years later the same studio manages to release a title that feels like Evil Dead, The Ring, and then follow it up with a title influenced by Hammer Gothic horror movies with vampires, werewolves, and talking dolls. Resident Evil is ever changing, not only in terms of gameplay, but also in terms of what inspirations are used for the visuals and story, and that's its strongest asset. It knows how to use its influences to its advantage, and just like I discovered my taste of horror by playing Resident Evil, my enjoyment of these films also makes me love these games even more.